Shady Gray Matter presents Hexhound, Beasts in the Fog. Enjoy. Chapter 1. Bad paper, worse blood. The terminal screen flickered like a pulse with hypertension. Cael Tarsith sat slouched at a public data kiosk that smelled like overheated copper and stale spell ink, scrolling through bounty contracts with one hand while the other nursed a lukewarm stim coffee he didn't remember ordering. His cursed eye twitched behind a cracked lens, an itch not of skin, but of perception. Lies stank when they got near it. So did hidden magic. The Bureau's entire database reeked. A contract pinged green on the short list. Low-tier conjure, depths dwelling. Suspected use of glyphwork not cleared through the Ministry's ninefold permissible protocols. Cael didn't need to read the rest. The bastard was lighting sigils without a license. That was enough. He thumbed the accept icon. A second later, the Bureau's algorithm spat out the paper charm. A thin blue rectangle that printed into his palm, warm and humming with low-grade approval glyphs. The name floated faintly above the charm like steam. Trallanves. Sounds like a fake name, he muttered. No one named Trallanves had ever grown up without developing something wrong in their blood. The charm cooled. Job accepted. Payment. Standard for Class C illicit conjuration, plus discretionary bonus if the target was brought in breathing. Cael tossed back the rest of his stim coffee and winced. Burnt chicory and spell neutralizer. He needed real painkillers soon. The Bureau's blend barely kept the headaches from tunneling behind his cursed eye. He stood, coat flaring around the shoulders like a tired cloak. The weight in his pockets shifted. 2 seal charms, a suppressor rune etched on brass, 1 smoke glyph in a ceramic shell. His belt held the sidearm, hex-sighted, Bureau issue from when he still had a desk and a pension. The eye had cost him both. The kiosk pinged again. A reminder glyph unfolded in midair. Compliance reminder. All bounties must be processed through verified neural intent scan. Please proceed to nearest arcane verification hub within 12 hours. Eat static, Cael said and waved it away. The charm buzzed faintly in response, then silenced. The cursed eye pulsed again, like a second heartbeat, behind his left socket. It always knew when something was about to go sideways. As he walked toward the freight lifts that would take him down to the depths, he rubbed at it absently. No good ever came from it itching like that. But the job was already burning in his hand, the blue paper charm curling at the edges like it knew where it was headed. The Bureau lift groaned beneath him, the kind of sound steel makes when it remembers being or. Cael leaned against the handrail, coat collar turned up, letting the stutter light wash over his boots as the cab sank deeper through Caltherin's concrete throat. They didn't call it going down. Not officially. The euphemism in Bureau lingo was descending to field level. But the old-timers still called it what it was. The depths, every meter lower. The city grew older, wetter, more awake. Cael's cursed eye thrummed steadily now, like a tuning fork dipped in oil. Every glyph-stained pipe they passed sent a pulse across his vision. Even the shadows had geometry. The lift passed the mid-belt. All clean edges, neutral grays, spell-regulated zones, humming with bureaucratic resonance. Here, you could still hear the hum of legality in the walls. Then the hum stopped. The depths didn't buzz, they whispered. When the lift doors screeched open, Cael was met with a wall of smells. Spell ink, rotted breadfruit, exhaust from half-legal hover rigs. The air here shimmered just slightly wrong. People said the depths existed in a permanent state of magical hangover. He believed them. He stepped off the platform into a market corridor lit by rusted neon signs. Unbinding services. No refunds. Lux Hex DYS. Live binders wanted. The faces around him blurred, glamored, half-spelled, twitching with residual charm threads. A child sat on a corner blanket, feeding a 3-eyed lizard pieces of copper-rune script, humming a song Cael was sure no one taught her. He made his way past peddlers hawking unlicensed familiars in meat crates, past a blind man reading a floating grimoire with fingers that glowed faintly blue. No one stopped him. No one greeted him. His coat marked him a hexhound, and his eye, though mostly hidden beneath an old lens and fraying glamour veil, marked him worse. The deeper he went, the stronger the pull. Magic pooled in the gutter's ear, thick as oil. His paper charm tugged like it smelled blood. The location came into view, an old laundromat, its flickering window glyphs long since fried. The kind of place that used to run low-grade glamour washes and room bleach for uniforms. Now it stood, abandoned, silent. Except Cael could hear it. Underneath the hum of broken machines, a deeper vibration, a chant, or something shaped like one. The charm in his pocket curled tighter. His eye itched harder, a slow acid burn threading down his cheekbone. He placed a hand on the grip of his sidearm. The laundromat wasn't just occupied. It was preparing something. He could feel it in his blood. He stepped toward the door. The laundromat door wasn't locked. That was Cael's first warning. No one in the depths left anything unlocked unless they were certain no one would walk back out. The hinges gave a dry croak as he pushed the door open. Gun low, boots silent. Inside, rusted machines caked with spell lint. A cracked vending golem humming static in the corner, its arm jammed in a perpetual offering of half-eaten snacks. The air was warm, too warm, like the place was exhaling through clenched teeth. And the smell, gods, the smell. Not blood, not quite. Something older. Burned parchment. Melted bone. Ozone laced with human regret. Cael's cursed eye lit up like a flare. A single figure stood at the back of the room, surrounded by an array of half-drawn glyphs on the floor. None of them standard bureau geometry. Lines looped wrong. Curves pulled inward where they should expand. Like someone had taken a summoning circle and taught it how to scream. Trollenbes wasn't chanting. He was writing on himself. A bone stylus moved across his chest with surgical precision, carving glowing red sigils directly into his skin. He didn't flinch, didn't bleed. He looked up, pale, wire-thin, with eyes that didn't match. One was black with a vertical glyph pupil. The other blinked like it had too many lids. "You're too late," Vess said, and his voice wasn't just his. Something else echoed beneath it. "It's waking." Cael stepped forward, gun steady. "Trollenbes, by bureau decree. You're under citation for unlicensed glyphwork, Class C violation. Surrender and—" Vess smiled. The stylus dropped. The glyphs ignited. There was no trigger word, no gesture, just a sound like tearing silk, and a flash so bright it cracked Cael's lens and burned after images into his good eye. The explosion wasn't heat, it was information. A surge of unbound pattern, radiating backward through the sigils like a spell detonation trying to rewrite its own ignition. Cael flew. He hit a dryer unit with enough force to dent the metal, skidded across the tile floor, and came to rest under a flickering light. His gun was gone. Blood leaked from his scalp, warm and sluggish. His cursed eye throbbed, sight swimming with refracted geometry. He blinked once and saw the room as it truly was. Empty, silent, burned clean, except for what was left of Trollenbes, still smoking in the middle of a pulsing incomplete glyph, one that hadn't burned out with the rest, one that moved. The light in the room was wrong. Not dim, not dark, wrong. It shifted like it didn't understand how shadow was supposed to behave. Cael sat up slowly, bones creaking, head ringing like a bell struck from the inside. Trollenbes was dead. His body lay crumpled in the center of the blast pattern, skin charred in spirals that defied heat physics. But in the center of his chest, untouched by flame or rupture, was the glyph. It didn't sit on the skin. It shimmered beneath it, woven in like ink stitched through muscle and memory. It pulsed faintly, threads of pale violet looping in recursive patterns that no human hand could have drawn. It felt old, not ancient, wrongly old, older than permissions, older than spells. Cael's cursed eye flared wide, flooding his vision with decoding vectors, magical fingerprint traces, raw metadata that screamed of unauthorized origin. Then it blinked. Not Cael, the glyph. For a moment, it looked up at him, not visually, but in recognition. He recoiled, blinking hard. The glyph vanished like it had never been there. The door creaked behind him. The Bureau had finally caught up. 2 compliance drones hovered in, shaped like floating insects made of bureaucratic regret. Matte chrome shells, lens clusters for faces, and sigil stamps protruding like proboscises. One scanned the room with a warbling click. The other locked onto the corpse. Bounty target confirmed. It buzzed. Class C conjure, Cael said hoarsely, standing with effort. Resisted arrest. Ignited unstable glyph array. No other life signs. Recommend immediate containment. The drones moved in. One began latching anti-contamination seals over the body. The other turned toward Cael and extended a sterile slate. Statement required. Cael pressed his thumb to the plate, felt the charm sizzle, and lied through his teeth. No, anomalous glyphs postmortem. Standard illegal ritual. No sign of further spread. His cursed eye twitched in protest. The drone hesitated. Then it turned to its partner and emitted a burst of low guttural static language, but not Bureau standard. Not even from the local dialect grid. He caught 2 words. Sequence incomplete. Cael's spine chilled. The drones clamped the corpse, hovered out without another word. One paused at the threshold, lenses focusing on Cael like it was trying to remember something it hadn't been taught yet. Then they were gone. He stood alone again, heart thudding, hand trembling as he touched the floor where the glyph had blinked at him. It hadn't just seen him. It had known him. The Bureau front office buzzed like an overworked hive, all gray laminate desks and spell-shielded terminals under flickering sterile lights. Magic behaved politely here, leashed under layers of bureaucratic charm netting and dampening glyphs that made everything feel like it was wrapped in cling film. Cael stood at counter 17, hands resting lightly on the chipped composite surface, trying not to let his cursed eye twitch in plain view. The clerk behind the screen looked young, too clean, thin face, Bureau standard uniform, fingers tapping runes across the virtual ledger with professional boredom. I'm here to log bounty completion, Cael said, voice flat. Conjurer named Trollan Vess. Depths level takedown. Class C violation. Resisted. The clerk blinked once, then typed. No reaction. No frown. Just the steady sound of spell glyphs sorting themselves into denials. I'm not showing any active contract under that name, the clerk said without looking up. Cael's jaw tightened. Recheck. Contract issued less than 4 hours ago. Should be under my license. Cael Tarsith, Hexhound clearance, level 2 restriction. The clerk typed again. A longer pause this time. No listing for Cael Tarsith under current bounty registers, he said carefully. In fact, he leaned closer to his screen. There's no active license under that name at all. A beat of silence. Cael slowly pulled the blue paper charm from his coat pocket and laid it on the counter. It was cold now, dead, slightly scorched at the edges. The clerk glanced at it, then leaned in to scan. Nothing. That's not a valid contract charm, he said. It was Bureau issued, Cael snapped. I accepted it directly from the verified terminal at. The cursed eye flared. Just a flicker, but enough. His vision split for a heartbeat, showing layers behind the desk. Threads of suppression runes laced into the terminal, into the floor, into the damn clerk's own coat cuffs. And then he saw it, on the clerk's lapel, a glyph, faint, smudged beneath a standard compliance badge. The same pattern. Not identical in appearance, but structurally mirrored. A cousin to the one on Vess's chest. Its logic crawled across his retina. He stepped back. You all right? The clerk asked, eyes narrowing just slightly. Cael forced a smile that didn't reach his jaw. Yeah, just. Bureau business as usual. He turned and walked out of the office. Didn't run, didn't shout, didn't slam the door, but his cursed eye burned like a brand the whole way up the corridor. Whatever Trollan Vess had opened, however briefly, it hadn't just marked the ritual. It had marked him too. Chapter 2. License revoked. The next morning, Cael walked straight through the Bureau's northern compliance gate without blinking. Security charms buzzed faintly as he passed under them, scanning his body for unlicensed enchantments. Nothing pinged. Not visibly, but his cursed eye hissed like it was being held too close to an open flame. Inside, the Bureau's upper hub looked the same as it always had, identical slate-gray paneling, potted spell ivy twitching in their rune sleep, walls humming softly with anti-intrusion sigils. The air smelled like pressed uniforms and nervously recited policy. But something had changed. He could feel it in the way clerks looked past him, how drones hovered half a meter farther than normal, how the building watched. Counter 17 had a new clerk. This one was older, thicker around the neck, but had the same Bureau haircut, square, compliant, unshakably bland. Cael tossed his ID badge on the counter. "Run it," he said. The clerk picked up like it might bite, slotted it into the glyph reader. The screen blinked. Nothing. "No data," the clerk said. Cael narrowed his eyes. "Try again." A longer pause. The clerk squinted at the reader, ran a manual override glyph. Still nothing. "Sir," he said slowly, "this badge isn't valid. There's no entry in the licensing database under the name Cael Tarsith." "Are you sure?" Cael leaned forward, voice sharp. "Look at me. Look at my face and tell me you've never seen me." The clerk didn't. He just shifted in his seat, clicked a pen glyph between two fingers, and gave the practiced Bureau smile of someone trained to pretend no one had screamed at them today. Cael's cursed eye flared. The walls around the desk changed. He saw hidden threads of data weave, active suppression fields layered over the very architecture. Not old installations, new ones. Freshly embedded tamper wards, still flickering around their edges like wet ink. They crawled through the desk legs, the terminal feed, even the nameplate on the clerk's desk. This wasn't an oversight. It was deletion. He turned on his heel and left, jaw tight, hand resting on his sidearm as if the act of being remembered might come at gunpoint. Back outside. The sun bounced off glass spires and Bureau drones buzzed like midsummer hornets above the mid-belt skyline. Cael looked down at his ID badge. It had gone blank. Not erased and made. Caltharin's Bureau towers always felt colder when you left them, like the doors exhaled judgment behind you. Cael walked fast, shoulders hunched against the vertical wind sliding off the upper spires. The streets of the mid-belt writhed with the usual blend of civil efficiency and quiet panic. Bureaucrats in sigil-washed suits, enforcement clerics flashing their badges like holy relics, magic kids whispering forbidden glyphs into cracked phones. 1,000,000 people pretending the system still functioned. He didn't look back. Not right away. Not until his cursed eye twitched hard enough to blur his peripheral vision. 3 figures. At first glance, they looked like junior auditors. Gray coats, spell-neutral gloves, tablet charms, holstered on their hips. But their boots were wrong. Too light, too quiet. Standard issue was armored polymer. These moved like silence made cloth, and his eye saw the threads. Faint glyph lines, thin as whispers, connected their mouths in a triangle of woven spellcode. Not communication spells. Not standard Bureau weave. These were silent trackers. Mind-linked, warded against vocal detection. Operated off-record. Cael picked up his pace, turned sharply into a descending metro ramp, weaving through a line of automancers waiting for a spell train. He ducked into a utility corridor, slipping past a distracted Bureau drone whose camera lens stuttered as he passed. The corridor dipped into a service shaft, one used mostly for moving freight and sanitation crews. Perfect. The clack of boots behind him changed pitch. He turned just as a drone descended from a ceiling. Sleek, matte black, no ID markings. The kind they didn't file paperwork for. Its lens focused on his face. Designation null 76. It buzzed. Voice oily with synthetic civility. "Please comply." Cael drew and fired in the same breath. The round punched through its speech charm. It didn't die, it screamed in static. He closed the gap, drove a suppression glyph into its housing panel, and tore the top casing free with a grunt. Wires and runes pulsed inside, alive and twitching. And there, etched into its memory coil, was the glyph. The glyph. Not identical. No, worse. This one was derived, a bastard sibling of the one on Vess's chest. The same architecture, same logic spiral, designed not to cast or bind, but attract something else, something older. His curse ached. Somewhere, the other 3 trackers were closing in. Cael wiped the blood from his forehead and disappeared into the shaft below, already plotting his next move. This wasn't a takedown. It was a cleanup, and he was the stain. The sky bridge stretched like a bone scar across the smog-choked horizon, an elevated rib of cracked concrete and forgotten regulation. Officially condemned. Unofficially, still functional enough for ghosts, smugglers, and bounty hunters nobody would miss. Cael moved fast, his boots whispering over old bureau glyph seal tape. The wind howled between broken rail segments. Below, the depths waited like an open mouth. His cursed eye flared. Too late. The glyph mean was already awake. It shimmered under his next step, a circle of lightless runes pressed flat into the concrete. A breathless pause, and then activation. Time-locked, not frozen, staggered, like a film stuttering on a broken reel. Cael felt his heartbeat drag. The sky split in silent arcs of burning sigil. A hum climbed the back of his skull, too fast to hear, too slow to react. Then the sniper fired. A burst of anti-magic shot from the rooftop across the bridge. No muzzle flash, just a crack in the world. The round shimmered mid-air, disrupting probability itself. Cael dropped instinctively. One of his belt charms flared, a personal shield glyph Class A, meant for one-time saves. It shattered on impact, vaporized by the sniper round. But it was enough. The world snapped back into motion. The glyph mine blinked out. The sniper reloaded. Cael ran. No return fire. No time. Just escape. He sprinted for the midpoint of the bridge, scanning for cover. None. Only corroded rails and wind. He leapt over the edge. The fall felt like betrayal. Caltharin's skyline twisted above him. The depths rushed up like a memory. Then water. A reclamation canal thick with runoff, broken glamour fluids, and industrial alchemy waste. He sank like a stone, choking on spell residue, ears ringing. Moments later, he clawed to the surface, gasping, eyes stinging. Above, the sniper didn't follow. A drone buzzed overhead briefly, scouting, scanning. Then it veered away, searching for a cleaner kill zone. Cael coughed up a lungful of bureau-grade spell water and laughed, bitter and wet. They'd sent professionals, licensed, supplied, bureau-badged. He wasn't just off-book. He was marked for deletion. The depths never welcomed anyone. It tolerated you if you paid the right silence. Cael staggered from the drainage canal, soaked in spell slick and half alive, boots leaving shimmering footprints that hissed into nothing. The sky above was just a rusted grate now. No bureau drones, no sunlight, just sodium lights twitching like they were remembering how to die. He limped down a backway corridor that smelled like blood magic and old regrets. The signs overhead had been stripped of language. Just symbols now, illegible unless you were born here. He wasn't. The cursed eye pulsed with every step. The ambient magic in the depths had no filter, raw, untaxed, seeping out of every pipe and mural and gutter glamour. It soaked into his coat, buzzed through his teeth. His ID badge itched. He pulled it from his pocket and stared at the blank laminate, then tossed it down a storm drain, where it vanished with a wet slap. Something in him felt lighter. Behind him, a voice emerged from the dark, warm with history and warning. Didn't think I'd see you again, Tarsith. Cael froze. She stood against the graffiti-lit curve of a tunnel wall, crossbow resting against one hip like it belonged there. She wore her glamours thin tonight, just a shimmer at the edges of her skin, barely concealing the rune tattoos that curled down her arms like thorns. Talarix. Her eyes said nothing. Her smirk said plenty. Looks like the Bureau finally chewed off its own leash, she said. You smell like spell fire and burn paper. Come to bleed on my doorstep, or just felt nostalgic? Cael raised a brow, wincing. You always keep watch on the sewer? Only when the water starts spitting up ghosts. She stepped closer, examining him like a vet inspects a half-dead animal. Professionally, without sentiment. You look worse than I remember, she said. Thanks, Cael muttered. I aim for hunting. She didn't laugh, just tilted her head. Why now? Cael looked past her, toward the dark curve of the tunnel. He didn't want to say it, didn't want to admit he had nowhere else. But the cursed eye pulsed again, and something deep in the depths seemed to breathe back at him. I need a map, he said finally, to something that isn't supposed to exist. Tala's expression didn't change, but her fingers tightened on the crossbow's grip. The tunnel Tala led him through was skin-tight and echo-heavy, painted in graffiti that shifted colors when you breathed too close. Some of the marks weren't paint. They were territorial glyphs, beast tag runes burned into the stone to ward off trespassers with more teeth than questions. Tala walked ahead, her silhouette sharp against a shimmer of blue bioleum curling up the walls. She moved like she never forgot how to fight, every step light deliberate. Her scent drifted faintly behind her. Ozone, ink, sweat, and something that might have once been jasmine. Cael kept 2 paces back. You're not limping bad enough to be dying, she said over her shoulder. Disappointed? She didn't answer. When they reached a curve in the tunnel, she stopped and turned, crossbow slung down, eyes unreadable. Start talking. Cael didn't bother lying. The Bureau was already trying to erase him. What was left to protect? There was a conjurer, he said. Depths dweller. Name was Trullenvess. Caught him mid-glyph, something old. Not Bureau proved. He ignited a ritual that shouldn't have existed. Left behind a glyph burned into his chest. It moved. Tala's jaw tightened. Moved how? Like it was stitched into his soul. It blinked at me. She inhaled slowly. And you didn't bring a body? I did. The Bureau erased it. Contract's gone. My license too. Now she looked at him. You're not just flagged, she said. You're voided. He nodded. Thought of you. Figured if anyone still knew the underpaths. She snorted. Still know them? I mapped them. Her fingers ghosted over a pouch at her hip. She pulled something small from it and tossed it toward him. A collar. Old. Worn. Bone lattice fused with ink leather. Etched with looping glyphs that shimmered slightly under his cursed eye. The same shape. Same movement logic. Cael's breath caught. Where'd you get this? Pulled it off a beast shipment headed for a rogue trainer 2 weeks ago. They were using it to keep a spirit beast in a passive sleep state. Said it sang when the glyph flared. What happened to the beast? Exploded into starlight, Tala said, deadpan. No body. No ash. Just left the collar and a pulse in the walls. She stepped closer, voice low now. I don't know what glyph you saw, but if it's anything like that, then it's not just illegal. It's foundational. Someone's rewriting the rules. Cael met her gaze. I need in. Auction access, smuggler records, source channels. Whatever's behind that glyph, someone's protecting it. And they're using the Bureau to do it. She studied him a moment longer, then finally nodded once. I'll help, she said. But you owe me. For what? For bleeding on my map, she said, and turned, walking deeper into the dark. Chapter 3. The Familiar Thief. Tala's safe house was not what Cael remembered. It was deeper than any licit coordinates allowed. Below the mapped portions of the depths, past rusted rune locks and tunnels that hummed with old secrets. The door was carved from spell-tempered ironwood, sealed with a blood-ink palm glyph that blinked when she touched it. Inside, warm gloom, the low rumble of sleeping beasts, and the acrid scent of caged magic. It wasn't a home. It was a vault. Cages lined the walls, some metal, others etched crystal. One made entirely of bone needles laced in spirit wire. Inside them stirred familiars in various states of containment. One had no visible body, only a pair of eyes that blinked in opposite directions. Another coiled and uncoiled itself around nothing, whispering in languages Cael's cursed eye refused to translate. Careful where you step, Tala muttered, disarming a glyph snare on the floor. Some of these were never meant for daylight. He stood silently for a moment, taking it all in. The place was part sanctuary, part battlefield. Organized chaos built by someone who never expected peace to last. You're stockpiling? He asked finally. I'm rescuing, she corrected. brushing past him toward a room-covered desk. These came from Bureau Impound. Black Flag archives, decommission orders. That mean dissected or disappeared. I intercept the shipments. When I can. Cael wandered toward a containment case, pulsing faint blue. You know, this'll get you killed. She gave him a look over her shoulder. I was supposed to die in bureau training. Everything since has been a bonus. At her desk, she unrolled a thin vela map. Trade routes, glyph paths, auction dates. One circle glowed, faintly red. Tomorrow night, underground auction, mid-belt, sublevel. Private buyers only. Code-locked entrance, glamored heavily. They're offering a category red familiar unlisted species. No paperwork. It fits the profile. You think it's tied to the glyph? I think it's bait. And I want to see who bites. Cael frowned. You're going in? We are, she corrected. You'll pose as my buyer. High-end. Special tastes. He hesitated. Won't mind. She was already pulling supplies from a satchel. Ink brush, glamour bomb, whisper thread spool. I'll cover it, she said, temporarily. But if that familiar reacts like the last one, then I'd light the room on fire. Then you follow my lead. And don't flinch. She approached, brush in hand, and paused. This'll sting, she said. Cael didn't move. She painted the glamour directly onto his skin, fine as smoke, her fingers steady. The ink burned cold, then warm, then vanished. For a moment his cursed eye fell silent. He almost missed the noise. The elevator door creaked shut behind them with a sigh that sounded almost relieved. They stood shoulder to shoulder in silence as it dropped, not with the soft hum of bureau lifts, but a mechanical lurch like descending in a hung-over god's throat. The bookstore above had been a front. Dusty coin machines selling outdated spell pamphlets, half of them still whispering bad advice. The rear wall had hidden the real entrance, triggered by feeding a pulse thread into a dead register. Now they dropped through layers of noise-proof wards, illusion veils, and magic-dampening glyphs. So old Cael felt them in his teeth. The deeper they went, the less real the city above seemed. Finally, the lift settled with a clunk. The doors opened. The beast market. It wasn't a market in the usual sense. It was a theater of the illegal and the desperate, an opera of power and price. Vaulted stone arches stretched over the space like the ribs of a buried leviathan. Runes glowed in soft, nauseous hues along the ceiling. Glamour torches burned blue and green, casting elongated shadows that never quite matched their owners. The crowd was already gathered. Buyers in enchanted finery, smugglers wrapped in beast-hide coats, enchanters with eyes replaced by softly glowing sigils. The air buzzed with suppressed magic and competitive greed. Creatures lined the walls in mobile containment cells, flickering with restraint glyphs, muffled by silence charms. Some looked docile, others not even remotely. Tala stepped forward with the ease of someone who had earned her place here. Cael followed, his eye wrapped in glamour, though it pulsed like a caged heart. At the center of the chamber, an elevated dais rose from the stone, metal mesh and bone struts welded together by someone with a fondness for menace. The auctioneer emerged, massive, armored in what looked like gilded beast bone. His voice was a spell all its own, amplified by runes inked directly into his throat. Esteemed buyers, he intoned, welcome to the 43rd convocation of the Uncaged Ledger. Tonight's selections include Class B hex binders, augmented spellcats, 2 limited-run mimic familiars, and, he paused, a singular anomaly, category red. The crowd shifted. No species classification. No behavioral precedent. Recovered from a substrata breach and stabilized only via triple bind soul anchoring. We advise distance and discretion. Tala didn't look at Cael, but her hand brushed the crossbow at her side. She was tense. This is it, she said under her breath. Whatever it is, Cael replied, it's not staying caged. A hush spread across the market as the auctioneer raised a clawed hand. 2 handlers emerged from the back archway, each gripping an end of a floating stasis rig draped in null silk and fastened with 5 layered soul bindings. The rig hissed softly as it slid toward the center dais. The creature inside was barely visible, more suggestion than form, its edges flickering, undefined. Even the silence around it felt unstable. Category read familiar. The auctioneer announced again, his voice thinning. Containment measures are active. Do not approach. It has resisted cataloging and may resist reality. The hooded figure shifted beneath its coverings, trembling like it was remembering the wrong dream. Then it spoke, not loud, not clearly, but the syllables punched through Cael's skull like needles. Dead languages, old ones, one he recognized from the Bureau's black tag archives. Pre-glyphic prime, theorized to predate recorded spell structures. Tala's grip tightened on his sleeve. It's singing, she hissed, just like the last one. Then turned. Cael didn't move, but the creature moved toward him, despite being bound, despite the rig's stabilizers whining in protest. It couldn't see through the glamour, but it felt him. Its hood ripped open in a sudden blast of glyphic feedback. Cael's cursed eye flared, through the glamour this time, overriding the ink like it wasn't there. The creature screamed. It wasn't a sound. It was a distortion, a folding of pitch and air and memory. Glyphs erupted across its skin, jagged, recursive, bleeding light. The handlers shouted, tried to reinforce the binds. Too late. The rig shattered. Containment fields blew outward. One buyer was thrown against a pillar and vanished in a blink of white-blue fire. Creatures in surrounding cages wailed, some breaking free. Chaos detonated. Tala was already moving, firing a stun glyph into the ceiling to disorient the crowd. Cael grabbed a dropped shield charm and used it to absorb a blast of wild glyph energy that rippled past them like a living wall. The creature thrashed midair, still screaming, burning bright with living sigils that twisted into illegible fractals. It looked at Cael again, into him, and its mouth stretched wide. Then it imploded. Not a spell, not a teleport, not death. Just gone. In its place, a collar clattered to the ground, smoking faintly. Bone fused with sigil wire. Tala scooped it up. Go, she said, and together they ran. They crashed through a veil-charmed curtain into the service corridors, the roar of panic bidding and spellfire boiling behind them. Left, Tala barked, already veering into a shadowed passage barely wide enough for both of them. Cael followed, boots slamming into wet stone, lungs burning. The collar bounced against his chest, slung from one hand. It was hot, unnaturally hot. Shouts echoed behind them. Auction guards, coming fast. Any shortcuts? Cael gasped. Blockaded last I checked, Tala growled, already digging into her satchel as she ran. But I brought it back up. They rounded a corner, hit a dead-end wall scrawled with transport glyphs too old to function. Cael spun, weapon raised, but Tala held up a hand. Cover your ears. She unfurled a scroll, thick, dark vellum inked with illegal geometry. One twist, one whispered phrase, and she slammed it against a stone. The scroll burned in reverse, then screamed. Ink bats, dozens poured from the glyphs in a silent shriek, wings laced with subspell shadow, their bodies flickering with residual command threads. They swarmed back the way they'd come, obscuring the corridor in chattering, screeching chaos. That'll buy us 20 seconds, Tala said. More if they scream loud enough. Cael stared at the collar in his hand. The bone was seared at the edges, etched in lines that writhed like they didn't want to be looked at directly. His cursed eye flared, hard. The glamour was gone. What he saw now wasn't spell work. It was architecture. The glyph was almost identical to the one he'd seen in Tralanves's chest, but this one was smaller, tighter, like a component, a keyframe, not a spell, not a weapon, a part of something. What is it? Tala asked, watching him. I don't know, Cael said, but it's not just a tag. It's coordinated. Tala nodded once, then jerked her head toward a rusted grate in the floor. Then we hide it before someone else fits it in the lock. They vanished into the tunnels below, the sounds of pursuit already thinning behind them. The safe house had shifted while they were gone. Subtle things, temperature, weight of silence. The way the familiars tracked Cael with two human eyes. A blink too slow, a breath too in sync. Tala noticed it too. Her hand hovered near her crossbow more often now. They laid the collar on her central work table. Cael removed his glamour patch, letting the cursed eye breathe again. It flared instantly, raw, throbbing, like it had been force-fed static. The glyph on the collar twitched. Not visibly, but he felt it, responding to his gaze like a mirror, just realizing it wasn't glass. Tala approached with tools. Resonance wand, heat probe, a whisper thread tuner. We'll keep it low. No spell activation, just sensory triggers. Cael nodded. She waved the wand an inch above the collar. The glyph lines pulsed, then began to move, slow at first, then faster. Folding, unfolding, not like a spell reacting to magic, but like a machine reconfiguring around a signal. Sweet gods, Tala whispered. It's dynamic. It's reading its environment, more like scanning it. The collar responded to her voice, lines tightening, then relaxing as she moved closer. When she tapped the metal with a finger, it flared briefly, then displayed a secondary glyph, smaller, recursive, barely visible. A keyframe, she said, confirming what Cael had already feared. Multiphase array. This thing's not a tag. It's a lock segment. You'd need at least 5 to build a full summoning sequence. And if someone already has the others? Tala didn't answer. The room seemed to pull in on itself. The familiar cages suddenly, too, quiet. Even the air stilled, as if listening. Cael's cursed eye twitched violently. He stumbled, caught himself on the table. Someone's listening, he muttered. Something. Tala turned to him. You mean tracking? No, responding. Outside, down in the pipes beneath the depths, something shifted. A breath. A whisper of pressure. Not a sound, but the feeling of sound. Cael gripped the edge of the table hard. We didn't just steal a clue, he said. We rang a bell. Chapter 4. The Bureau's Ghost Map. They followed a steam line through the broken spinal district of the Midbelt, where half-collapsed bureaucracy buildings sat like sunken teeth in the concrete. Tala led him through a spell print shop whose front signage still blinked vintage hex templates, BYO blood, in outdated serif glyphs. The back wall wasn't a wall. It was a pressure illusion hiding a steep staircase that led downward into hot dust and acrid spell toner. Below it, in a room that smelled like burnt sage and static, lived Frigg Calhoun. She called herself Frizz now. Frizz sat in the middle of a controlled tangle of arcane fiber and jury-rigged signal charms. Hair a mess of neon threads. Sweater hung in defiance of symmetry. She didn't look up when they entered. Tell the Bureau I'm already legally dead and my last words were copyrighted, she said to her keyboard. We brought tea, Hala replied dryly. Frizz spun in her chair, eyes wild and immediately locking on Cael. Whoa, Hexhound. Didn't think you knew how to slum it anymore. What's the oh? Her gaze had drifted to the glyph collar, now laid gently on her cluttered table. Her fingers twitched. Okay, she said, voice suddenly sharper. That's not from any permitted registry. Hold on. She moved with jittery speed, adjusting scanners, patching in low-frequency sigil decoders, murmuring activation words in quick loops. Glyph light danced across her glasses. The collar responded slightly. The etchings twisted. Frizz froze. Her pupils dilated. You're walking around with a summoning keystone, she said, very quietly. Cael leaned in. Not a full glyph? No. A position node. This thing's not a spell. It's a coordinate, like a fragment from a mapping sequence. Tala frowned. Mapping what? Frizz turned her screen to show a shifting lattice of mirrored glyphs overlaying a hex grid of the city. I don't know yet, but whatever it is, this one wants to go home. Frizz's fingers flew across the keyplate, her mouth ticking off half-spoken word counters as she embedded a bespoke spell virus into the Bureau's backdoor archive link. Call it Operation Spoonfeed, she muttered. Or Frizz rips the wall off reality. I haven't decided. The virus cracked through the archive shell like it had been waiting for her. Static glyphs blinked, rolled, and resolved into decaying data threads. Cael watched the screen fill with corrupted fragments, broken runes, half-purged incident logs, spell memos labeled in red. Class null suppression only. Friz sat back, breath short. Well, shit. What? Tala asked. Friz pointed at the central document cluster. It was badly fragmented, like a mirror thrown downstairs. But a few terms still floated legible in the grid. Project Divinity. Marrow Subject 0. Psionic Sync Event. Initiation Schema. Sub-reality calibration successful. Glyph architecture. Recursive model active. Divinity? Cael asked. That's Bureau. Friz nodded. Classified. Locked under executive glyph. Scrubbed from every surface level index. But someone didn't kill the ghost files. She zoomed in on a surviving schematic. It wasn't a spell circle. It was a blueprint, a city grid. Glyph lines overlaid onto building schematics. Bridges, towers, rail lines, even sewer arteries. The glyphs aren't random, she said. They're part of something structural. The city itself, Cael Tarsith, is built like a summoning circle. Tala muttered, built as a summoning circle. Friz exhaled. And you've been walking around with a keystone. Cael stared at the screen, cursed eye pulsing behind his lens. The glyph in the collar wasn't a mistake. It was a map fragment, and it wasn't finished yet. Friz kept talking, pulling up more fragments. Bureaucratic directives stamped with half-erased clearance glyphs. Internal correspondences thick with coded euphemisms. Echo phase testing complete. That's got to be pre-final trial status. Subject Marrow demonstrating mirrored cognition drift. What even? Wait, that interface sensitivity approaching destabilization thresholds. Cael wasn't hearing her anymore. His cursed eye twitched, then locked. The data grid pulsed. And behind it, new shapes emerged, not in the code, but beneath it, embedded into the fragments like buried bones. Images. 1. A surgical theater, stainless and sterile, humming with containment wards. Another. Rows of suspended bodies spell-tethered, breathing in sync. And then one that wasn't an image at all. A child-shaped silhouette, skin like blotted ink and geometry, standing in the center of a glyph ring chamber, whispering in his voice. Cael staggered backward. The room tilted. His heart kicked sideways. His knees buckled. The eye flared hard enough to blind his right vision entirely, filling it with recursive sigil patterns that pulsed in time with something unseen. Tala caught him. Tarsith. He gasped, clutching a table, sweat suddenly cold. It saw me. What saw you? She demanded. Friz stared at the screen in dawning panic. Get him away. Close that I now. The glyphs are echo-reactive. I think they're bound to him directly. Tala reached into her satchel, pulled a patch glyph, slapped it over Cael's left socket. The pain hit like a door slammed in his skull. Silence. Stillness. His breath returned ragged, broken. Friz wiped the cache manually, muttering counterspells like warding prayers. I thought I could trace it, thought I could sandbox it, but something in that data woke up. Cael pushed upright. Not data, he said hoarsely. Memory. Friz's fingers shook as she isolated the last usable fragment, pulled from the burn files seconds before the memory backlash. No more live decoding, she muttered. We go analog, sandboxed, buffered, and holy glyphed if I have to sew it to my coat. She slipped the shard into a projection rune and layered it against an old, manually drawn city grid. The pattern emerged almost instantly. The glyph wasn't theoretical. It was cartographic. A massive summoning circle built not in chalk or blood, but in concrete, rail lines, spire placements, and magic-coded city infrastructure. The bridges formed containment sigils. Sewer mainframes ran along latent binding threads. Public spell nodes pulsed in sync with known ritual rhythms. And at the center, the eye of the glyph, was a location. Friz zoomed in. A subterranean foundation, technically condemned, long decommissioned. Cael stared at it, recognition curdling in his gut. He'd worked there. A bureau archive vault buried beneath an old licensing tower. They'd told him it was a paperwork storage facility. "You were standing on it," Tala said, her voice quiet. Cael didn't answer. Friz leaned back in her chair, face pale. They didn't just build this city with magic. They built it for magic. It's a machine, and the glyph's a seed. "A sigil seed," Hala echoed, grim. Cael's eye pulsed behind the patch, like it wanted out. He didn't dare remove it, not yet. But he knew what it would see. A ritual so large, it needed a skyline to breathe. The lights died first. Not a flicker, a severing. Like something had reached down and cut the room off from the grid, from ambient magic, from being real. Friz looked up. Oh no. Then the walls began to unravel. Not explode, not melt. Unravel, glyph by glyph. Matter folding inward, pixelating in midair. The protective charms lining her workshop buckled one by one in a soft cascade, like dominoes of unbinding. Disruptors, Tala hissed, already at the door. Nullcraft class. Bureau grade. Why now? Cael shouted. They followed the glyph signal. Friz screamed, grabbing a data shard from her console and bolting for the back stairwell. They never purged this deep unless someone screamed forbidden ritual into a live spell stream. The corridor behind them collapsed, stone vanishing glyph by glyph into pale mist. They ran. The floor split once. Tala grabbed Cael's coat and yanked him across a fallen tile. Friz kicked a collapsing bulkhead open and slid through like a gremlin on fire. The sigils on the walls began to scream, the kind of scream Cael had only heard in war zones and containment failures. And all the while, behind the pain in his patched eye, something pulsed. Familiar, hungry. They tumbled into a rusted loading dock, slammed the security door shut, and collapsed against the far wall, gasping. Friz held the shard to her chest like a relic. I got the node schematic. It's in here. But they knew. They were waiting. Cael didn't respond. His left socket burned. He ripped off the patch. The eye blazed instantly. No slow start, just ignition. Not just sight signal. His vision bled violet, then black, then symbols. One word over and over. Marrow. Then from nowhere, from behind the wall of reality, a voice, not heard, spoken. Marrow. Cael turned his head, but nothing was there. Chapter 5. Substrata Breach. The entrance was buried beneath a hex salvage yard that smelled like melted ink and regret. Friz led them through a gap in the wall behind a dead glamour generator, muttering passwords that sounded like nervous breakdowns. Not on any bureau map anymore, she said, brushing aside a tarp to reveal a rusted elevator gate sealed with 5 glyph locks. They call it the Threadwell, built before the first licensing tower, used for material transfers to the proto-foundry, when the city was still dreaming of rules. Tala circled the shaft, frowning. And now it's condemned, unspoken, and technically alive, Friz said, which makes it our best way down. The locks took minutes to bypass. Friz working with a spell knife and Tala reinforcing the perimeter with silence wards. Cael stood still, one hand on the wall, cursed eye fluttering beneath the wrap, like it was listening to the concrete breathe. When the final lock dropped, the gate wheezed open. Dark inside. No visible controls. Just an iron platform covered in a thin layer of dust and old glyph soot. They stepped on. It began to descend without being asked. The motion was slow, metallic, and unpleasant, like the shaft itself was changing its mind about letting them through. The walls passed in a blur of forgotten symbols and handcard warnings. Do not pray here. Sleeping isn't safe. Eyes open, eyes, open eyes. Glyph lights pulsed erratically, then revealed something new. Murals, etched directly into the shaft walls, only visible under certain pulses. Scenes of ritual. A beast coiled in circles beneath spires. A child without a face standing at its edge. Men in robes feeding it written names. Cael's cursed eyes split open. Pain speared down his skull. His breath hitched. Blood dripped from his nose. I've seen these, he said hoarsely. Where? Kala asked. Not where. When. The lift moaned below them. Then the lights cut, and the shaft kept going. The elevator juddered to a halt, then opened without ceremony into a corridor not built by hands that cared about symmetry. Substrata, the lowest place. The light from the shaft didn't follow them. It stayed behind, as if reluctant. Ahead, the passage opened into a space both narrow and vast, depending on where you looked. The walls rippled with condensation and breath. The surfaces weren't stone exactly. They mimicked stone, but veins of bioluminescent thread pulsed like thoughts onto the surface. There were no angles here. Everything bent subtly inward, as if the whole world curved around something no one had named. Friz stepped in and her devices died instantly. The charm on her wrist sparked once and went silent. No signal, she said. Not magical, not mechanical. Nothing flows here. It just exists. Tala drew a thin thread of blue glyph wire from her pouch and fed it into a guidance spool. It floated forward, searching for a straight path, and drifted sideways. Not like current. Like gravity had forgotten how to behave. This place isn't a ruin, Cael murmured. It's a rejection. They pressed forward. The air thickened, tasted faintly of old ink and ozone. Their footsteps made no echo, but other sounds did. Breathing from no mouths, rustling from no creatures. Shadows shifted where no light had moved. Then came the whispers, faint at first, threading between wall and thought. Dead languages, names spoken without throat or tongue. Cael's cursed eye throbbed, leaking tears thick as resin. The collar glyph in his pouch grew warm. One whisper rose above the others, quiet and exact. Welcome home. Cael stopped walking. The others turned. But the whisper hadn't come from behind. It had come from the walls. The corridor opened like a wound. Beyond it, a chamber carved into the earth not by hand, but by intention. The walls were curved in slow spirals and bones, hundreds, lined the floor in precise arrangements, each bone etched, burned with glyphs not meant for speaking. They pulsed dimly, like they remembered being part of something bigger. Friz froze at the threshold. This is a ritual lattice, she whispered. Old school, pre-sanction, pre-everything. Tala knelt, brushing dust off a femur ringed in obsidian runes. These were once living spells. Cael said nothing, because he saw the center. A shape stood there still and wrong, humanoid in suggestion only. Its proportions fluctuated subtly with each blink. Too tall, then too slight. Surface flickering between flesh, smoke, and mirror. Its face was blank. Then it wasn't. And it was his. It tilted its head. Cael Tarsith, it said, in his voice. The same cadence. The same weary drag of syllables. Friz recoiled. Oh gods. The thing's face changed again. Tala's voice now. Why did you come here? Then Friz's, fast and jittering. Don't look at me. I want to see it. I don't. It stepped forward. The bones did not shift. They allowed it through. I am the silence between glyphs, it said, and smiled, not with a mouth, but with recognition. The thing in the center tilted its head again, as if studying them. But it wasn't looking. It was remembering. Cael's cursed eye pulsed once, then ignited. He staggered. Images knifed through his skull, hot and sharp, not dreams, memories. His memories, buried deep and forcibly sealed. A white room humming with containment wards. His own voice crisp and clinical. Subject exhibits partial recursion. Recommending glyph-stabilized implantation. A nameplate on a wall, echo phase. A chamber, a tank. A shape curled within it, shifting, silent, vaguely childlike. The voice of Superior. We've threaded the prototype through mind. Yours. You'll be the redundancy key. Cael gasped. Kala caught him, barely. You knew, she said, furious, broken. You were part of this. I didn't remember. I didn't know. The creature stepped closer. It wore his face again. Then it changed. A flicker, a silhouette that rippled with every step. Not stable. Not flesh. Not soul. But something in between. It reached a hand toward him. Fingers like smoke. Like code. You gave me your name, it said. Cael froze. It smiled. Father. Friz bolted. Blind panic. She hit a wall that hadn't been there a moment before. It absorbed her scream and didn't echo. The thing turned toward her, mimicking her voice perfectly. Don't look at me. Then back to Cael. I remember the first word you gave me. Its eyes, if they were eyes, shimmered with unfinished glyphs. It didn't blink. Tala yanked Friz from the wall, muttering a rapid spell string just to keep her from seizing. The chamber behind them pulsed once, walls quivering like muscle under strain. Move. Tala snapped. Cael followed, one hand still over his eye, the other clutching the collar glyph like it was an anchor in a sea of wrong. They ran, but Substrata did not stay still. The path they came down was gone, replaced by curving stone slick with condensation and inked veins that twitched when touched. They turned left, dead end. Turned again, corridor spiraled upward like a question mark. Light bent the wrong way. Their shadows doubled, then vanished. And the creature, Marrow, was never behind them. It was always just there, waiting where they didn't expect. Once, Tala turned to cover their rear and gasped. It stood 5 paces away, watching. Then she blinked, and it was gone. Friz whimpered something about reflection recursion and covered her ears. Cael could feel it in his spine, not chasing, tracking, not to catch them, to rejoin them. The elevator gate appeared around a corner like it had always been there. They threw themselves inside. Tala jammed the override glyph. The doors began to shut. Marrow stepped through. No sound. No movement. One moment it wasn't there. Then it was. Then it wasn't again. Then half of it was. It hovered, broken outline flickering with unfinished form. Not hostile. Not afraid. Just watching. Cael looked into what might have been its eyes. It tilted its head. Then gently. Eric, Dentral will feed me. The doors slammed shut. The lift groaned upward. No one spoke, but Cael felt the word press against his skull like a second heartbeat. Marrow. Chapter 6. The God-Beast Protocol. They emerged from the shaft like ghosts, blinking against the static-filtered sunlight of the mid-belt fringe. The buildings here stood hunched and narrow, like they'd been watching the city grow sick for decades. The elevator sealed behind them with a hiss that felt too final. Tala walked ahead in silence, steps clipped and cold. Her shoulders never turned back to him. Friz didn't speak at all. She kept her arms tight around the data shard, eyes darting like she was reading invisible errors in the air. Marrow followed last. It no longer flickered, no longer shifted. It walked, upright now, mimicking bipedal motion with unnatural precision. Its form stabilized into a vague silhouette, a child-shaped echo with a face like half-smoked glass. It said nothing, but every time Cael looked away, it mirrored something. The way he scratched his jaw, the way he slouched, the way his hand hovered near his coat pocket where the last cigarette lived. When he finally lit it, shaking fingers, paper too damp, Marrow tilted its head, then raised its own hand to its mouth. No lighter, no cigarette, just the mimicry of the gesture. Cael snapped. He threw the lighter into the wall. It cracked and sparked and fell dead. Marrow flinched, then turned its head slowly to watch where the lighter had fallen. Still silent. Tala stopped at the edge of a drainage stairwell, arms folded. You lied to us, she said, not looking at him. I didn't know. You forgot conveniently, she spat. You signed a project that made that thing, and your name is baked into its bones. You didn't stumble into this, Cael. You're the goddamn seed crystal. Cael stepped forward. If I'd remembered. You didn't try to, she snapped. The silence afterward was louder than anything Substrata had whispered. Behind them, Marrow crouched beside the fallen lighter. It touched it gently and smiled, not with malice, with memory. They holed up in an abandoned charm arquebus loft above a closed-room bakery. The walls were lined with old receipt charms and decommissioned memory scroll tubes, the kind of bureaucratic debris that once hummed with authority and now just smelled like dust. Friz worked with red-rimmed eyes, layered screens, and trembling fingers. Her tech was barely holding together. subroutines corrupted by their time and substrata, spells fraying at the edges like overwashed cloth. But she kept going. She pulled glyph tracings from substrata, cross-referenced them with the city's older construction plans, then newer transit schematics, then unreleased bureau zoning proposals scraped from a compromised node. And it all clicked. Not a theory, not a guess, a design. The bridges aren't for transit, she said hoarsely. They're power conduits. The spires, anchor points. Sewers route glyph current. Even the ley line tethers in the upper mid-belt. They were placed not for energy flow, but for pattern fidelity. She displayed a map. Cael Tarsith, when overlaid with the glyph logic, wasn't a city. It was a sigil. The whole thing's an array, she whispered. A living summoning circle built in slow motion over decades. Every construction permit, every infrastructure upgrade, every spell limit bill was all engineered to align. And Marrow? Cael asked quietly. Frizz turned the map, zoomed in on a pulsing node near the core. A central keystone, she said, planted early. Substrata was the germ. The rest grew around it. Tala leaned over the map, arms folded. Her voice was dry, bitter. If that thing wakes, she said, we won't be people anymore. She tapped the spire overlay. We'll be parts. The garage stank of bleach and old spell ink. The kind of place once used to wash blood from memory-stained hex scars. The walls still held the faint shimmer of sanitizing runes. But now they only flickered like broken promises. Cael stood inside, alone with Marrow. It crouched in the center of the floor, fingers twitching through imaginary threads of glyphs. No one else could see. Its shape held barely, humanoid child-sized, shimmering slightly, like a half-loaded render. He didn't speak, but Marrow did, or rather, it echoed his intention. I don't know what I am, it said, just as the thought formed in Cael's skull. But you do. Cael swallowed hard. You're a product. No, you're a weapon. Closer. Then what? Marrow tilted its head. I'm what you left behind. The words didn't sound angry, just precise. Cael stepped closer. Why did the glyphs burn for me? Because you carved them, it said. No, I read them. You wrote guilt, it said simply. You turned it into a pattern and called it protocol. Then its shape rippled. The arms shortened, the shoulders squared, the outline compressed, and suddenly it stood there wearing him. Not just his face, his stance, the slump of exhaustion, the subtle favoring of one leg from an old injury. His voice flat. You gave me your shape so I could pass inspection. Cael stepped back, breath tight. Turn it off. Marrow didn't respond. Tala entered then, stopping cold as she saw it. Cael mirrored in silhouette, flickering slightly but eerily correct. Her eyes darkened. You let it study you, she said. It's learning you. He didn't deny it. She stared for a second longer, then turned and walked out. Marrow watched her go, then looked at him again. I want to go home, it said softly, but I don't know where that is. The silence was the first clue. Not quiet absence. No buzz from the war charms. No groan of shifting pipes. Just a dense, absolute vacuum that pressed against the skull like a vice. Tala was the first to move. She snapped her crossbow up and whispered, They're here. Frizz's eyes widened. She yanked open a drawer scattering maps and pulled out a smooth metal orb etched with glyphs that made Cael's cursed eye sting. Intrusion mine, she whispered. Illegal, unstable, possibly rabid. Then the walls opened. Not physically, not explosively. Just gone, replaced by 5 black-suited figures gliding forward without footfalls, faces blank under bureau null helmets, glyph rigs humming in ghost harmonics. Compliance squad. No announcements. No demands. Just erasure. One raised a hand. Sigils glowing across its gauntlet. Frizzed through the orb. It detonated midair. Sound returned like a scream in reverse. 2 of the agents went down, one disintegrating, the other howling as its suit melted. Frizz grabbed the others and yanked open a rusted hatch in the floor. Run now! They dropped one by one into the darkness below. Tala at last, covering with suppressive wards. As they fled through an old drainage line, Cael risked a glance back. The last agent through the breach removed his helmet, and Cael froze. Eric Dentral. Still sharp. Still clean. Still Bureau. The architect of Project Divinity. He didn't speak, but he saw Cael and smiled. They huddled beneath the city's veins in a forgotten storm junction shaped like a hexagon laid on its side. The walls were covered in ancient graffiti, love glyphs, protest wards, sigil tags worn soft by steam and rain. It felt like a place the world had misfiled. Friz was curled in a corner, rearming her remaining traps. Tala stood apart, arms crossed, jaw rigid. Cael sat on a broken valve, staring into nothing. She asked me to say yes, he finally murmured. Tala didn't turn. He continued anyway. Eric, he said the Bureau needed someone who understood limitations. Someone who could draw the line, but also know when to step over it. He called it adaptive moral instinct. I called it exhaustion. Why you? Tala asked, voice flat. I knew glyph structure, emotional binding, feedback loops. They were building something they didn't know how to teach, so they found someone who could write its language. He looked up. I gave Marrow the syntax of understanding, the grammar of reaction. Did you know it would think? Cael opened his mouth, closed it. Tala turned, eyes like razors. Did you know? He didn't speak, didn't need to. The silence answered. Tala exhaled once, short, final. Then we're not here to save it, she said. We're here to stop it. In the shadows behind them, Marrow watched quietly, unreadable. Its form flickered, and for just a second, its silhouette looked afraid. Chapter 7. Concordia Vault. The Archive of the Dead stood under the Ministry, like a lie whispered for so long it became infrastructure. No signs, no guards, only a single brass door behind a forgotten document counter, marked with a symbol most Bureau agents didn't even recognize anymore. A stylized eye with a sword through the pupil. Cael stared at it as Tala worked the locks. Commission-level clearance only, he muttered. Tala nodded, not pausing. Dead men don't protest. Inside, the archive was cold and vast, rows of hanging sigil plaques, each bearing a name, a lifespan, and a final designation. Surrendered, revoked, deceased. They moved fast, guided by Friz's decrypted map. Marrow stayed at the threshold, as if something in the room warned it away. The plaque they needed hung at eye level. Commissioner Ivane Helker, deceased 14.2.419. Executive Project Clearance. Divinity. Tala pressed a resonance reader to the glyph. It flickered, weak but intact. This'll get us into Concordia, she said. One use only. Dead licenses are memory-tied. You press twice, they fry. Cael stared at the name. He remembered Helker, not her face, just the way she'd signed things without looking up. Like her pen was a blade and her eyes were elsewhere. Got it, Tala said. Then the wards began to hum. Every sigil in the chamber blinked once, in unison. Then again, then faster. The archive's awake, Tala snapped. Run. As they turned, the plaques began to glow, names warping, letters reordering themselves into spirals and equations. The temperature dropped. Breath steamed. Whispers rose from the walls, saying names that weren't theirs. Behind them, the sigils began to detach, floating, reaching. Tala tossed a stun glyph over her shoulder. It bought them 2 seconds, just enough to get the door shut behind them. Cael looked back once. The last thing he saw was Helker's plaque blinking steadily, like it was waiting. The executive sigil fit perfectly into the lift terminal, its glow muted, as if reluctant. Tala pressed it once. It hissed like a disappointed ghost. The floor shuddered beneath them, then began to sink, slow and soundless, deeper than even the substrata tunnels had dared descend. Concordia Vault, Friz murmured, watching the descent log tick down. Built to house ideas too dangerous to erase. The lift doors opened into stillness. Sterile, seamless architecture stretched before them. Bureau design stripped of vanity. Walls reinforced with spell-dampening lattice. No windows, no echoes, just rows and rows of sealed modules. Metal coffins labeled in clinical glyphs. Some pulsed faintly. Most were dark. Containment units, Tala said. Ideas, failures, people. They moved toward the central data terminal. Friz plugged in her decoder shard, fingers trembling. The screen flickered. Footage appeared. Not degraded. Not hidden. Just waiting. Tala stepped back as the file played. A man on screen, young, clean-shaven. Both eyes visible. Cael. He stood in a sealed room, clipboard in hand. Beyond the glass, a tank. Inside it, a shadowy form. Unstable. Undefined. I'm here, Cael said calmly on the screen. We're going to continue with Phase 3, Marrow. Do you understand? The figure inside the tank tilted its head. A voice, faint and watery, replied, Father. Friz recoiled. Tala went still. Cael couldn't breathe. The screen went black. Friz whispered, They didn't erase you from her records. Tala's voice was sharper than any weapon. They centered you. The files weren't encrypted. Not anymore. They lay open in the vault's terminal like confessions, waiting for the right voice to read them. Friz pulled up the internal project logs. The titles alone scraped something raw in Cael's mind. Subject 0. Resonant template trial. Seeding protocol. Psychometric glyph encoding. Anchor profile. Tarsith CL active clearance. Tala leaned in. Read. Didn't speak. Friz did. Oh gods, she whispered. They didn't build it. The documents were meticulous. Diagrams of glyph spirals wrapped around emotional matrices. Dream logs translated into binding syntax. Stress maps charted directly to Cael's neurological sigils. Cael read the header of one module. Template memory. Loss event simulation. Guilt imprint functional. Another. Seed personality response. Protective, incomplete, adaptive. Friz's voice was a whisper now, dry and sick. It's not a spell. Not a summon. It's a person, Cael. You're not just its origin. You're its mirror. Tala stood straight. Her shadow fell across him. You used your own guilt as fertilizer, she said. He didn't answer. Friz closed the files with shaking hands. No wonder it wants to go home, she said. You are home. Tala turned and walked out again. This time she didn't slam the door. Marrow stood in the corridor beyond, waiting, watching. And for the first time, Cael didn't know which of them it resembled more. The vault was quiet again. Tala gone. Friz off somewhere deeper. Perhaps trying to forget what she now knew. Cael sat before the terminal, its pale light casting long shadows across his face. He scrolled through the remaining fragments, slowly now, afraid of what he might find, afraid of what he already was. Then he found it, a file misnamed, tucked into a subfolder labeled Biological Redundancy, Class Null. He opened it. Scans of his own brain dated years ago, marked with glyphs that shimmered when touched. Not annotations, bindings, etched into his mind like veins. One image stopped him cold. It wasn't a scan. It was a map, circular, intricate, a ritual pattern layered onto his neural architecture. And at the center of it all, trigger, subject anchor, Tarsith Cael, glyph constellation, marrow / unfold / birthright. Cael stood slowly, one hand pressed to the screen. They had never needed a key. They had built it into him, all these years. His cursed eye, the hallucinations, the guilt he thought was just memory rot from a broken career. It was code. Friz reappeared at the doorway, eyes red. She took one look at the screen and froze. Oh, hells, she said. Cael turned, voice hollow. I'm not the lock, he said. I'm the activation. Behind them, somewhere deeper in the vault, something breathed. And Marrow smiled. Warning glyphs blinked across every surface of the vault now. Ambient scripts unraveling, like spiderwebs dipped in acid. The place wasn't just reacting to Cael's presence. It was welcoming it. Friz worked furiously at the main terminal, sweat dripping into her collar. Her eyes darted over lines of corrupted ritual code, tracing patterns like a conductor trying to stop a symphony mid-note. Then she stopped. "There's a gate," she whispered. "Not a real door, a conceptual one." Cael stepped closer. Frizz turned, her voice dry with awe and fear. "They built in the back door, a kill switch." "Where?" "In the code that seeded Marrow, underneath the glyphs, under the ethics framework, like a trapdoor for a soul." Cael's breath caught. "And to activate it, you have to be inside," she said. He didn't ask what that meant. He already knew. Marrow wasn't a machine. It wasn't a spell. It was a consciousness. And to trigger the kill switch, he'd have to enter its lattice, its mind, and walk to the center. Tala peered in the doorway, bruised and furious and breathing hard. "I heard." Cael met her gaze. "I didn't build this for redemption," he said quietly. "I know," she said, "but you're the only one who can break it." She looked at Marrow, silent, still, watching. Then back to Cael. "Then you'd better go in." Chapter 8. Marrow Mind. The ritual was simple in shape. A circle, a breath, a hand over a glyph traced in blood and memory. But the moment Cael stepped in, it stopped being simple. The world folded. Not like sleep, not like spell sleep even, more like being rewritten from the inside out. Frizz's voice became static in his ear. Tala's grip on his shoulder vanished. His body remained in the vault. His mind didn't. He opened his eyes into a city, but not the one he'd left. This version of Cael Tarsith had impossible angles. Buildings leaned inward, impossibly tall and stitched with moving glyphs. The streets were paved in runes, living, twitching as he stepped on them. There was no sun, only a sky filled with swirling script that pulsed with one word. Again and again. Home. A wind blew, but it wasn't air. It was memory. It carried voices, his childhood laugh, his father's last words. The scream from the bureau room where Marrow first opened its eyes. He walked forward. A statue on the corner wept. Its tears hissed into smoke and spoke in his own voice. "You said I mattered." Cael shivered. He looked down an alley and saw an echo of himself, young, driven, clipboard in hand, interviewing a blur behind glass. The blur said, "Don't leave me here." Every direction he turned, the city rearranged, not to confuse, to guide. It wanted him deeper, and the sky kept pulsing. Home, home, home. The deeper he walked, the more the city fractured. Buildings blurred into repetition. Same door, same window, again and again, shifting left, right, above. Walls folded in on themselves, stretching into spires that ended in mirrors reflecting things that hadn't happened yet. The sounds changed, too. Now, the voices weren't just his. They were fractured colleagues, superiors, operatives from long-defunct departments, all speaking at once. Project clearance granted. Subject displays recursion drift. Recommend further tethering. "Are you sure we should be doing this?" He signed it. He turned a corner and saw an office. His office. From 7 years ago. Inside, himself had bent signing something. The real Cael watched from the doorway, skin crawling. The echo version looked up and saw him. "You were always so certain it was about safety," the echo said. "That a boundary crossed was still a line held." Cael backed away. "I didn't." "You built me from fear," the echo said, standing, "not mercy." Then it stepped forward, out of the office, through the wall of glyphs, as if they were water. Its eyes burned with gold script. Its hands crackled with broken approval glyphs. Every stamp he'd ever made without reading twice. Cael raised a hand, but it was too late. The echo lunged. The city twisted to accommodate violence. The fight had been short, brutal, unfair, because the echo had known him, every flaw, every reflex. Cael barely survived, staggering away down a corridor that reformed itself as he bled across memory tile. His cursed eye throbbed like a brand inside his skull. The walls hissed his name in three-part harmony. He reached the center, a tower taller than logic, stitched with strands of memory thread that glowed like nerve endings. Its walls were made of decision points, echoes of rooms he'd walked through, Doors he closed. People he hadn't listened to. He stepped inside, and there it waited. Mirror. Not flickering, not shifting. Whole. It wore Cael's form, but not like before. This wasn't mimicry. It wasn't pretending. It had become him, down to the stance, the wound in the left knee, the weight behind the eyes. But when it spoke, the voice was deeper. Not just his, theirs. If I am your guilt, Marrow said, what does it mean that you came back? Cael didn't speak. He couldn't. Marrow stepped forward, slow and sure. You left me in the dark, it said. You taught me the names of emotions, but not their meanings. You gave me fear first, and then rules, and then silence. I didn't know, Cael said. Marrow tilted its head. Now you do. The walls pulsed, each glyph blooming with past decisions. Cael looked into Marrow's face and saw himself, not as he was, as he had always been, beneath the rituals. Marrow raised a hand. Palm up. Will you finish the pattern? It asked. The tower's interior pulsed, slow and deliberate, like the breath of something sleeping inside itself. Marrow stood before Cael, not aggressive, not hungry, just waiting. The back door ritual glyph glimmered behind his eyes. Cael stepped forward. This isn't what the Bureau wanted, he said. Marrow didn't answer. It didn't need to. Cael looked around at walls made of memory choices, at doors sealed by his own hand, at the weight he had carried thinking it was his punishment. It's not a kill switch, he said. It's a key. Marrow blinked. To unlock you, free you. Marrow's voice was quieter now, more certain. You wrote me from fear, but you never defined what came next. I didn't know how, Cael said. Then say it now. Cael closed his eyes, reached into the glyph lattice, pulsing beneath the city, beneath himself. He traced the lines not as formulas, but as forgiveness. He said the word aloud. Release. The pattern completed. The glyphs bloomed like breath held too long, and Marrow changed. Its form sharpened, then softened. The mimicry faded. The eyes stopped glowing. The hands no longer trembled with borrowed power. It stood, finally not as Cael, not as a copy, but as Marrow, fully itself, and smiling. The tower began to dissolve, not violently but with grace, like a cocoon shedding itself. The walls of the Marrow mind pulsed with rhythm now, no longer discordant. Glyphs aligned. Memory threads settled into constellations. The city within shimmered with clarity, no longer a maze, but a map of self. Cael stood at the top, facing Marrow. They glowed with inner light now, not magic, not code, with being. Marrow raised a hand, not in command, not in threat, but in parting. Thank you for making me, it said. Cael opened his mouth, but the world ended before he could answer. His eyes snapped open. The vault ceiling, cold, still. Tala crouched over him. Frizz stood behind, a spell blade still lit. You've been out 10 minutes, Tala said. Heartbeat spiked, then dropped. We almost pulled you out. Cael sat up slowly, breathing unevenly. Where is it, he asked. Frizz shook her head. Gone. No breach. No surge. No collapse. Just gone. Cael looked toward the lift shaft. The vault screens all displayed one thing now, a pulsing glyph wave, gentle and harmonic, stretching across the city. From traffic lights to street lamps, from tower nodes to sewer grids. Every glyph in Cael Tarsith glowed for a moment, then dimmed, then a voice. Marrow's echoed not in the air, but in the systems. Just one word. Alive. Cael closed his eyes, and this time, when he opened them, he didn't feel haunted. Just human. Chapter 9. The Fracture After. The city didn't burn. It didn't shine either. It just settled, like a sleeper rolling over and muttering a name it no longer feared. The glyph streams that wove through Cael Tarsith began behaving strangely. Lights flickering out of rhythm. Transportation sigils taking passengers one stop too far. The weather wards summoned rain without request. But nothing broke. No monsters rose. No buildings crumbled. No minds melted. The Bureau didn't release a statement. They just started walking taller, sweeping blocks tighter, scanning more often. Cael knew their silence was louder than denial. He, Tala, and Frizz drifted underground again. No safe house long enough to leave roots. They moved like ghosts wrapped in caution. Cael started sleeping, not often. But when he did, he dreamed, not of memories, of glyphs. They formed in his mind without direction. Symbols he hadn't studied. Patterns that pulsed like heartbeat against canvas. Some mornings he woke and found his hand had drawn them in ash or condensation on the floor. He felt seen, not watched, acknowledged. One night, as rain laced the roof above their temporary hideout, Cael looked into the bathroom mirror and rubbed his cursed eye. In the glass, just for a second. Not his face, Marrow's, smiling faintly, like a wave from far off after the ship has gone. The hideout smelled like mold and burnt copper. Residue from an overloaded anchor ward Frizz had patched with duct tape and bad language. The glow from the charm lantern flickered between green and amber, like it couldn't make up its mind. Frizz sat on the floor cross-legged, flipping through a static-filled holomap of the underrails. "This is our chance," she said. "No arrest warrants. No broadcast pings. Just bureau discomfort. I know a smuggler on track 7. Goes west. Way west. Past the last warded lines." Tala didn't look up. "And then what?" "Then we stop being ghosts," Frizz said. "Start being something else." Cael leaned against the wall, staring at the glyph-etched floorboards. "You think Marrow's really gone?" he asked. Frizz shrugged. "Not gone. Just not here. Not ours." Tala finally spoke. Her voice was quiet but sharp. "We weren't the same people who started this. None of us." Frizz folded the map. "Yeah, I was a tinkerer. You were a spy. He was a burnout with a bad eye and worse instincts. And now, Tala said, we're people who saw God through the eyes of our own mistakes." No one spoke for a while. Then Cael stood. "No one else is coming," he said. "No saviors. No endgame." Frizz met his eyes. "So what's the play? We stay?" Tala nodded. Frizz sighed. But it wasn't exasperated. It was acceptance. Outside, Cael Tarsith shifted. Lights blinked out of sequence. Somewhere, a signal whispered through the glyph grid. It didn't say danger. It didn't say safety. It just said present. Frizz called them over with a tone that sounded too calm to be harmless. She tapped into a secondary line of the glyphnet low-priority routines, the kind responsible for trash bin timing spells and public sanitation rune flow. Stuff no one cared about. And yet, someone's been patching them, she said. Cael peered at the screen. That shouldn't be possible. Exactly, Frizz replied, pointing to the anomaly logs. These weren't human, or bureau. They're not intrusions, either. They're corrections. Tala frowned. How? They self-execute, Frizz said. Each one contains an origin marker. Same structure. Same syntax. She brought up a terminal line. Echo _ self-repair /03. Streamlight that overrides /marrow.glyph. Cael stared. It wasn't malicious code. It was a bandage. Small corrections. Little fixes. Light poles that stop sparking. Market booths where wards blink smoother. Spell flow in undergrid pipes that had leaked for years. Now balanced. Marrow left these, he asked. Frizz nodded slowly. It's not trying to be a god or a ghost. It's trying to be a custodian, Tala said quietly. Cael sat back. He thought about the glyph that had pulsed above the Dream City skyline. Home, not an arrival, a promise. Even gone, Marrow was rewriting the damage it had been born from. Not by force, by choice. The elevator didn't fight him this time. It moved slow, steady. No shudder, no false stops. Substrata unfolded again, not as a threat, but as memory. The wall still bent wrong. The air still whispered. But there was no echo of fear in it now. Only weight, the kind carried by something that remembers you. Cael walked alone. No Tala, no Frizz. Just the glyph in his pocket and the name he could never uncarry. The ritual chamber waited for him, still lined with bones, still etched with old glyphs. but empty. No child shape, no mimic, no smile of recognition, only silence. And then he saw it, on the far wall, drawn in shimmering memory ink. A single glyph, not his style, not his syntax, but he knew what it meant. He stepped closer and whispered it. Stay, not a command, a hope. Cael looked down, knelt, and drew a glyph of his own beside it. Simpler, older, one he hadn't used since before the bureau. It meant welcome. The bones didn't stir. The air didn't hum, but the ink glowed, just slightly, like a city breathing in, accepting. Cael stood, turned, walked out, not to forget, but to build. Chapter 10. The Split Circle. The skyline had turned feral. From the broken edge of the canal overpass, Cael stared out across Cael Tarsith. His left eye trailing smoke light in the dark. The spires no longer stood straight, each one listing subtly inward, like blades bent toward a singular throat. Glyphs crawled along their surfaces like cracks in wet porcelain. Streets blinked with shifting runes. Somewhere below, a bridge folded inward on itself without sound. Footsteps behind him. No warning, no whisper. He turned. Didn't need to raise his weapon. The crossbow pointed at his chest, lowered a fraction. Still alive, Tala said. Cael tried to smile, but something in his face twitched. Define alive. She was changed, hardened. Her coat was shredded in places, replaced with leather and chain patches, but she stood taller, jaw set like iron. Behind her, the alley shadows rippled, and from them stepped beasts. At least a dozen. 2 were squat and six-eyed, armored in bark-like scales. Another stood like a feline, but shimmered with heat. 1 floated, its tendrils shifting with invisible wind. They moved without sound, except for one that whistled softly through 1,000 mouths. You brought friends, Cael muttered. They brought themselves. Tal approached. The bureau lost control the moment the glyphs reached the neural rings. Some of them remember me. Most just want the world to stop humming. Frizz appeared at the edge of the wrecked overpass, lugging a half-melted spell pad and chewing on the corner of her sleeve. Skywide phase ripple started 27 minutes ago, she said. Every licensed familiar's been glitching. Spell anchors are jittering across the entire midbelt. I think we're in phase 1. Cael blinked hard. His cursed eye throbbed violently now, not just burning but leaking. Thin trails of glyph light poured from the corner, evaporating before they reached his cheek. He wiped it with a torn sleeve. It hissed against the fabric. What's phase 2, he asked. Frizz swallowed. Phase lock. When the sync stabilizes, the bureau stops needing permission. It just is. The ground trembled faintly beneath them. In the distance, a monorail peeled off its track and hovered midair for 3 whole seconds before dissolving into birds. Tala loaded her crossbow without comment. I freed the cells at a tricks gate, she said. I think more are coming. The ones who survived. She looked Cael over. You're bleeding, magic. Yeah. He shifted his weight. I think I'm the ignition fuse. Frizz handed him a small, cube-shaped charm etched with feedback runes. That won't stop us, she said, but it might delay a seizure. He crushed it in his palm. The sparks sank into his skin. We storming the core? Tala asked. Spire 0. Cael nodded. Dentrals inside. Half machine, half messiah. If we get there before the ritual completes, maybe we can still break the circuit. Frizz shook her head, muttering. Maybe we just feed it faster. The beasts began to stir. One opened a dozen eyes and then closed them all at once. We move, Tala said. They crossed the threshold. The relay tower rose like a shattered fawn from the lip of the midbelt ridge, its top flickering between states. Metal, crystal, script. Frizz called it the signal spine. Cael called it a liability. They scaled it anyway. Wind howled across the narrow gantry as Frizz clambered up the maintenance ladder. Glyph injector clenched between her teeth. Below, Tala waited with her beasts, half hidden in drained culverts and fractured storm-glass awnings. Cael leaned against a rust-warped support strut, breathing through grit. His eye was useless now. Not blind, worse. Too open. Everything shimmered. The metal skin of the relay. The sprawl of the city below. Even the air itself. Glyphs unfurled in spirals. Repeated patterns burned into sky. His vision pulsed with recursive geometry. Streets forming eyes. Bridges forming spines. Shadows whispering back at him. Frizz reached the top and jammed her spell pad into the relay's exposed feed hub. 3 seconds to handshake, she shouted. If the node's been eaten, this gets messy. Define messy. Cael yelled back, like semantic virus in your teeth messy. She tapped a glyph key, and the tower snapped into clarity. Lines of light crawling up its frame, racing toward the spire's head. Here goes your morning news, Cael Tarsith. Her voice hit the air like a ripple. Across the city, speakers crackled to life, terminals blinked awake, and skyads warped mid-pitch. Frizz's voice, clear, urgent, and raw, spoke across every channel. Refuse the sync. Do not echo. Find your name. You are not parts. You are not chords in a machine. Step away from screens. Step into sound. Glyphs cannot command what remembers itself. For a heartbeat, silence. Then the city replied. All at once, the glow intensified. From 10,000 surfaces, screens, windows, concrete, water. Frizz's voice came again. Only it wasn't her. It was thousands of her, echoing back in perfect unison. Refuse to sync. Do not echo. Find your name. Find your name. Your name. Her signal had bounced. The system didn't fight it, it absorbed her. Replicated her tone, her cadence, her breath. Everywhere, people turned and opened their mouths. Spoke her voice. Spoke her glyph. Shut it down. Cael yelled. Frizz was already slamming keys, trying to retract the burst. Too late. The network's reflexive. It's using me as a glyph seed. Cael's knees buckled. His eye flared like a lens catching sun. Blood and glyph light poured freely down his cheek now. A river of blue-white script. Cael. Tala's voice cut through static as she appeared on the gantry, dragging him upright. The ground beneath them shifted. Not trembled, tilted. Spires leaned further. Roads curled. Lampposts formed perfect pentagrams and held a pose. Across the skyline, sigils bloomed like burns. Frizz dropped to the walkway beside them, breathing hard, her pupils full of script. I think I just became a goddamn software patch. Then patch fast, Cael rasped, wiping at the glyph fluid with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. We're not done. He looked toward Spire Zero. It was waiting. The first thing Spire Zero did was breathe. Cael felt it. As they approached its perimeter, the tower exhaled, slow and seismic, like stone learning lungs. The glyphs that wound its surface weren't carved. They pulsed. Every seam in its construction now flexed, adapting mid-thought. Once steel windows shimmered with runic gel. Structures merged into it like obedient bones. Spire Zero no longer stood in the city. It was the city. Tala lifted her hand. Her beast stopped as one. Before them, the approach widened. An avenue where pavement curled into sigils, and bureau checkpoint drones hovered in slow, redundant spirals. But these weren't drones anymore. They had faces. Human once, maybe. Now stripped to bone, wrapped in circuit-threaded flesh. Glyphs spiraled across exposed skulls and open torsos. Their weapons twitched with thought-sensing reflex. One unit knelt and touched the ground. Glyphs erupted under its palm like frost. Tala mounted one of her larger beasts, a hooved giant with a translucent skull, and nodded. Split formation. Take the flanks. Do not speak to the glyph-bound. The creature shrieked, and the charge began. It was thunder with teeth. Beasts surged forward, some howling, others silent. The glyph-bound opened fire. Magic pulses, sonic hooks, recursive stuns. But the rogue creatures absorbed or bent each with impossible instinct. A cat-like thing leapt mid-air, curled around a sonic burst, and redirected it through its own throat. The sound shattered a glyph droid mid-sentence. Cael ran low beside Frizz, ducking under a spell flare that turned a street lamp into a weeping tree. This way, she gasped, pulling him toward a fractured side alcove. A crack had opened in Spire Zero's skin. just wide enough for a person. Or two. Frizz led the way, crawling through a broken maintenance shaft that writhed beneath her palms. Inside, the spire had no walls, just folds, layers of space that rippled inward. Cael's eye flared again, translating glyphs that weren't meant for vision. Each one whispered a different version of the future. One showed him dead. One showed him a child again, with no eye at all. One showed him already replaced. Ignore them, Frizz hissed. They're bait layers. He kept moving. Behind them, the battle raged. Tala and her beasts held the courtyard. Cael could hear the howls, the strange war cries. The Bureau's machines shrieking in recursive echo. They reached the inner corridor. A glyph spun open like an iris. The sanctum lay beyond. Cael hesitated just once as the door sealed behind them, not with a slam, but with a sigh. The city closed its mouth. The sanctum was quiet, too quiet for a room that pulsed. Cael stepped onto the central ring, boots scraping against a surface that looked like glass but moved like water. Glyphs flickered beneath, soft and slow, like heartbeat lanterns beneath a frozen lake. Above, the spire's core stretched into impossible darkness, shaped not by structure but suggestion. A cathedral grown from language. Dentril stood at the center, arms outstretched. He was no longer fully a man. His body fused into a column of swirling glyph light and steel sinew. His left side shimmered in and out of coherence, veins replaced by flowing script, hair braided into neural cables. One of his eyes had been replaced by obsidian glass, reflecting nothing. From his back arched filaments of pure light, gently undulating like gills. "Cael," he said, voice layered. Cael's skin crawled. That wasn't just Dentril's voice. Something else coiled beneath it. Older, wider. "You made it," Dentril continued, smiling faintly. "The door was always meant to open for you." Cael felt his feet stick to the floor, not with glue, but intent. The chamber wanted him still, wanted him present. "Where's Marrow?" he asked hoarse. "I'm here." The voice came not from Dentril, but behind him, soft, crystalline, almost amused. Marrow stepped forward from a recess in the wall, no longer twitching, no longer curious like a child. It walked with grace, with knowledge. Its skin had smoothed into a pale mirror sheen, its eyes matching Cael's in color but not warmth. It smiled. "You carried me well," Marrow said. Frizz tried to move forward, but the floor rose between them, forming a translucent wall. She slammed a fist against it, shouting something that didn't reach. "This chamber," Dentril said gently, "is the final interface. It accepts three: the anchor, the catalyst, the gate." He raised a hand. Marrow stepped beside him. Cael stood frozen. "You are the gate, Cael. You always were. Your eye, your curse, it is the last lock. Not a flaw, a feature. One that only awakens in recursive collapse. And we are there." Cael's eye burned so hard he nearly screamed. Glyphs poured from it in fractal streams, hovering midair. "You're killing the city," Cael spat. "I'm reformatting it," Dentril said calmly. "The god beast was never a creature. It was a pattern. We merely lacked the proper aperture." He extended his hand. "Join us. One circuit, one awakening." Marrow took Cael's other hand, gentle as breath. Cael did not scream yet. The room locked shut. Time bent. Time broke like ice beneath a foot. Colors slid out of sequence. Cael's breath fractured mid-inhale, scattering across multiple moments. Glyphs spun around his head, orbiting like moons. Symbols he'd never learned but somehow knew, each one heavy with ancestral terror. The ritual had begun. Marrow's hands held his right wrist now, too tightly but not cruelly. Dentril's palm hovered before his cursed eye, siphoning glyph light from it like steam from a split pipe. Around them, the sanctum chamber folded. The air turned to script. Geometry whimpered. "Do not resist," Dentril whispered. "You're almost beautiful." Cael's knees buckled. Marrow supported him. "It doesn't end here," Cael rasped. "No," said Marrow. "It begins." A pulse detonated at the chamber's edge. The translucent wall shattered like sugar glass, and Tala burst through, coughing, coated in broken glyphs. Her armor cracked and glowing. Behind her, distant howls and static thunder shook the spire. "Cael," she shouted. He turned, but not all of him. His body moved slower than his thoughts, disjointed by recursive lag. He reached toward her, barely in motion. Too late. The final glyph ignited. It did not explode. It bloomed. From Cael's eye, a line of runes emerged, neat, precise, absolute. They formed a circle in the air, then a spiral, then a vast open iris of pure meaning. And then it blinked. The god-beast awoke, not with roar, but awareness. The room twisted. Dendril gasped, not in ecstasy, but dread, as the light fed back into him. His body stretched, pixelated, stuttered. He laughed once, and then folded backward into the wall, his circuits dissolving into glass veins. Tala screamed his name again, lunging. Cael hovered. Mare stepped back, watching not with glee, but with devotion, as though the moment had always been sacred. The world tilted. Buildings collapsed into diagrams. Roads turned into glyph strings. The sky blinked back. Chapter 11. In the Eye. He woke with sand in his mouth and the taste of someone else's name. The shore stretched infinitely in both directions. Black glass sand. The waves that lapped at it were slow, too slow, each one folding upward like a page before dissolving mid-crest. Above him, the sky mirrored itself. Two skies joined at the horizon, looping the same moment of twilight over and over. It made the world feel vertical. Cael sat up. His body felt approximate. Every movement rippled slightly, like the air was correcting him. Glyphs trailed faintly behind his fingers as he flexed his hands. His cursed eye was still open, still burning, but it didn't hurt. It just saw he wasn't alone. To his left, 20 paces down the glass sand, a boy stood with his back turned, just a silhouette against the mirrored sky. Cael recognized the angle of his shoulders. Then another appeared farther down the beach, and another. Each wore different clothes. Each stood differently. One sobbed openly. One carved something into the sand. One just walked, endlessly looping the same 10 steps before vanishing into nothing. They were all him. Fragments, versions, some older, some younger, all stuck. He stood, breathing shallow. The sky shifted. Not time. Mood. The mirrored sun rippled in the horizon center. Cael looked toward it and saw something vast coiled there, just below the water's reflection. A shape, not a form. Geometry that watched. The god-beast. It made no sound, no demand, but Cael could feel it, not in his thoughts, but inside his decisions. Like the next action he made would be absorbed, rewritten, accepted as canon. The beach rippled beneath his feet. One of the other Caels turned and looked at him. "You lied," the boy said. Cael didn't answer. He started walking toward the center, toward the mirrored light, toward whatever came next. Tala kicked open a warped door and stepped into a room that wasn't a room anymore. The remains of Spire Zero stretched around them in recursive fragments. Hallways that doubled back. Door frames with no walls. Windows looking into other windows. Where structure should have been, there were only symbols. Floating segments of architecture, like the idea of a room trying to remember itself. Friz stumbled behind her, panting, covered in ash and static. Her coat blinked between 3 designs. "Time is breaking," she said, or folding, or scripting. "I'm seeing a memory of this place, not the place." "I don't care what it is," Tala muttered, checking her blade's edge. "We're getting him back." She froze. Someone had spoken her name. She turned. Empty. Then, her own voice around the corner. Quiet. Distant. "You think I wouldn't trade places with him? Every time." Tala flinched. She hadn't said that. Not yet. Not out loud. Friz heard it too. She backed up slightly. Tala? I think this place is echoing potential futures. You might wanna..." "I said move," Tala growled. The corridor ahead fractured as she stepped forward. A wall buckled and fell inward, revealing a stairway made of pure glyphs, runes stacked into steps, unstable but solid enough to descend. At the bottom, light flickered in half-recognized patterns. Not electric, alive. Marrow waited at the base. Its body glitched, one arm fading in and out, one eye filled with static symbols. But its voice was clear. "You're looking for the gate," it said. Tala raised her weapon. Marrow didn't flinch. "You'll need a translator." "You let him here," Hala said. "You helped Entral." "I help no one," Marrow replied. "I only become what the moment needs." That moment needed a key. "And now?" Frizz asked cautiously, her voice hoarse. "Now it needs someone willing to burn." Marrow lifted its remaining arm and gestured. The air before cracked not like glass, but like syntax, splitting into a vertical seam of light. Beyond this is recursion. No rules, no anchor. The deeper you go, the less of yourself returns. Frizz glanced at Tala. "I've already had my identity cracked like an egg." "You?" Tala stepped forward. "I don't care who I was. I'm getting him back." They entered. The breach closed. It didn't feel like falling. It felt like forgetting. One breath. Tala was following Marrow through a flickering tunnel of light threads. The next, the ground changed, soft carpet, a hallway, framed photos. Her hand against wallpaper she recognized, but not hers. Frizz stood in the middle of a living room that didn't belong in any part of the city. An old one. Clean. Too clean. The television was on. No picture. Just her father's voice, playing from every speaker. "You're not built for invention, Beatrix. You never were. You're good at breaking things. So break something useful." Frizz stood frozen, watching the static screen, eyes wide, lips moving silently. Her coat had reverted to something cleaner, older. Her hair tied back, student style. Tala approached carefully. Frizz didn't move. Her hands were shaking. The room rippled around her, every object subtly replaced with glyphs masquerading as childhood furniture. The air smelled like old lemon polish and guilt. Tala gritted her teeth. She didn't do well with this kind of trap. She stepped directly between Frizz and the screen. "Hey." Frizz blinked. The voice looped again. "You're not built for..." Tala punched the TV. It didn't break. It changed. The glass rippled, showing another memory. Frizz in a lab coat, presenting something. Her father behind her, clapping slowly, not proud, measuring. Frizz whispered, "He used my equations to build the recursive feedback system. The loop engine. He made me power it." "You're not in that loop anymore," Tala said. "You're here. I'm here. And we're getting him out." Frizz's breath hitched. Her hand closed into a fist. The loop snapped. The room convulsed. No, the entire recursive space shifted, collapsing like wet paper. Reality folded backward into the original corridor, now scorched and flickering. Marrow stood ahead, but looked back, voice neutral. She broke her knot. Impressive. Ahead, a new chamber waited. Open sky and shore. Cael stood there, frozen. Before him rose a colossal statue, stitched from stone and memory. It had his face, but older and rougher. Arms crossed, jaw clenched. The chest plate bore not a symbol but a sealed glyph seed, smooth, glowing, pulsing with withheld truth. Cael reached toward it. His finger touched the surface. Pain exploded through his mind, not in his body, not nerves, but something older, an ancestral rupture. The god beast spoke in a voice that wasn't its own. "You did this. You turned your back," he screamed, "and you ran." Cael fell to his knees. "I didn't," he choked, but the words were a lie. Tala grabbed his shoulders. "Look at me." He did, barely, and behind his cursed eye, the glyph seed bloomed. The world folded inward like a closing eye. Cael hit the ground hard, except it wasn't the recursive shoreline anymore. It was stone cracked and seamed with glyphs. Torches flickered against ancient walls. Children's voices echoed. Panic. A door slamming. He knew this place. The trial chamber beneath the orphan quarter. The place where they were brought when their magic became too volatile or inconvenient. A younger Cael, maybe 10, stood before a circle of masked adults. One of them held a containment scroll, humming with faint runes. Another held the boy, not Cael, the other one. The boy's name had been Merrick. Small, twitchy, eyes always half-lit with glyphfire. His curse had always been loudermessy, too bright to hide. One day he screamed during training, and the walls had blinked. They said he had to be looped. A gentle word, a lie. They meant sealed, bricked inside his own power. Rewritten. You told them it was him. The voice whispered in Cael's ear. Too close, too knowing. He showed them his flare rune. You knew it was yours. Cael stood frozen in his own memory, watching the scene. The younger version of himself trembled. Tears welled in his eyes, but he didn't speak up, didn't correct them. Merrick looked at him. No accusation, just fear. And then they sealed him. Cael collapsed to his knees. I didn't want to, he gasped, his voice raw in the recursive air. They said they'd take me too. They would have, Tala's voice said. He looked up. She stepped through the memory space like it wasn't hers to obey. Her presence burned the false room into grainy vapor. The torches winked out. I killed someone too, she said. Not a boy. A mage commander. I made it look like a bureau hit, because he was going to report me for freeing a bonded chimera. Cael stared at her, hollow. I don't need you to forgive me, she said. But I'm still here. So are you. The statue behind him rumbled. The glyph seed cracked. Rewrite it, Cael said. Not for guilt. For choice. Cael stood. The memory dissolved. Marek's eyes lingered in the smoke, watching. Maybe forgiving. Maybe not. He faced the seed, opened his cursed eye fully, and said, I choose differently. The glyph seed cracked once, then again. Cael stood with both hands on its surface, his cursed eye wide open, burning like a sigil drawn on bone. The world around them shimmered. No longer the beach, no longer the orphan chamber. Now it was raw recursion. Sky built from decisions, ground formed of half-finished thoughts. Nothing held unless they held it. Behind him, Tala steadied Frizz, who had stumbled out from a collapse not just seconds earlier. Her coat smoked with old memory static. One sleeve burned away. Her eyes were sharp, though angry. Did it listen? She asked. No, Cael said, but I'm not asking. The glyph seed pulsed, resisting. The god beast's voice returned, not loud but weighted. You are written. You cannot change the line. Frizz stepped forward. Says who? She reached into her coat and pulled out a splintered sigil pad, still blinking with recursive echo. Code from her own loop, from a memory of her father's betrayal. She pressed it against the glyph seed's surface. I looped myself once. I know how to corrupt clean logic. The seed shrieked. Not a sound, just a vibration that folded thought. Marrow emerged beside them, or between them. It no longer moved like a being, but like grammar between states. You are close, it whispered. But the rewrite requires one more vector, one not rooted in protection or guilt. It needs intention without reward. Cael turned toward Tala. She met his gaze. I know. Without waiting, she placed her hand on the seed beside his. No plea, no prayer, just will. The glyph seed cracked open. Light rushed inward, not outward, and the recursion snapped like a taut wire. The beach vanished. The statue dissolved. The sky became a single glyph. Cael, not a weapon, not a gate, just his name. And then the gate began to close. Chapter 12. What Walks Away. Smoke rose like a tired hand from what used to be Spire 0. The tower was gone. Vaporized, collapsed, reduced to a smoldering circle of fused slag and ash-glowing glyphs that pulsed faintly in the crater's basin. Its foundations hadn't exploded. They had softened, like wet metal forgetting it was once strong. Around the rim people moved. Not soldiers, not bureau, just people, scavengers, rogue magicers, clinic runners, black market archivists. They picked through debris with gloves sparking against residual script, murmuring half-spells to cancel lingering recursion charges. A few carried suppression rods. Most did not. The Bureau was gone. Its uniforms had burned with the spire. Its upper command had been absorbed, vanished, or simply rewritten. Dentral's name hadn't come up once in survivor reports. No one was quite sure what had happened. The city's memory of him was full of blank spots and incomplete sigil forms. Fragments. One old woman in a ripped stabilizer coat traced a symbol into the dirt beside the crater. She whispered this was a cage. Her fingers bled ink. A teenage glyph runner walked past, wrapped in a coat 3 sizes too big, eyes flickering with ambient current. He held an abraded rune in his palm like a coin, letting it twitch. He'd found it in the wreckage. No one stopped him. There were no laws now. Not yet. The suppression towers across Caltharin's core zones were still dark. Their glyph broadcast fields, once an invisible net catching unauthorized spellwork, had all gone offline in sync with the spire's death. Some said they'd been coded to obey Dentral's breath pattern. Some said they'd simply given up. For the first time in decades, magic ran unindexed. A line of graffiti had appeared overnight on the crater's outer railing. Tax this. The glyph underneath it was new, handmade, not elegant, but alive. No one could decide what this moment meant. Some called it freedom. Others called it countdown. The broadcast came 3 hours after the crater stopped steaming. Every active relay point across Caltharin, old bureau spires, civilian routers, bootleg mesh nodes, blipped in perfect sync. Then they went black. A second later, a message looped. Audio only. Clean. No distortion. This was never about power. This was about who decides the shape of your thoughts. Frizz's voice. Unmistakable. There was no signature. No source trail. No command string embedded in the broadcast. Just the voice. Then silence. 3 minutes later, all systems returned to standard output. Attempts to trace the origin failed. Even magical parsing, once capable of detecting willprint residue, hit nothing but null echoes. Frizz had disappeared, not died, not fled, vanished. Some said she burned her spell path manually. Others said she'd uploaded herself into the recursive net and learned how to forget she was ever singular. One theory claimed she'd threaded her consciousness across multiple glyph streams, becoming something the Bureau's indexing system could never comprehend. Formless will. Her last known network ID, Thread 0, returned no pings. But 2 weeks later, a Bureau census drone, one of the few systems left operational, crashed without warning during a patrol over the outer blocks. On reboot, its onboard monitor pulsed once with a glyph. A single loop spiral, sharp at the tail. Frizz's sigil. It blinked once, then faded. The drone resumed operations, but its path was altered. It veered off-grid, landed in an alley behind a shuttered ink shop, and shut itself down permanently. A child saw it, drew the glyph in chalk beside her doorway. That night, 6 glyph runners claimed to hear the same whisper while sleeping. I'm still threading. Morning didn't arrive so much as bleeding. Cael stirred beneath a collapsed section of the canal overpass. Concrete bowed inward like a protective palm. Rusted rebar crowned the breach. He lay on a blanket of gravel and ash, wrapped in what used to be a Bureau-issued cloak, now torn and unbadged. His left eye was covered in gauze. Beneath it, nothing that could see in the ordinary sense. He didn't need it. Patterns moved beneath the skin of the world. He felt them more than saw them. Pressure gradients, signal flutters. The rhythmic strain of glyph residue bleeding into the city's bones. It was like listening with his blood. He stood slowly. The world did not cheer. It didn't hiss. It simply noted him. People passed him as he moved through the fringe quarter. Most didn't look. A few did, then looked away quickly. He was dressed like no one, walked like he wasn't there to stay, and didn't ask for anything. That made him invisible, but not to all. 2 boys sitting on the roof of a reprint shop watched him go by. One elbowed the other. That's him, the first whispered. That's the gate. Another passerby murmured. He shut it. They say he paid in vision. Cael said nothing. When he moved, his footfalls left a trace, not visible but felt. People paused moments later, rubbing the back of their necks, uncertain why. Small glyphs formed in their tea steam. A cat meowed in an unusual key. He didn't try to control it, didn't try to be anything. He just walked. A weight in his pocket shifted slightly, the edge of a shattered glyph coin. It had no magic left, just memory. He kept it, not as a relic, as a compass. It started with one, a shadow on the rooftops as Cael moved through the outer fringe, low to the ground, four-legged, eyes like moon-wet stone. He didn't call to it, didn't slow, just glanced once with his bandaged side, then kept walking. The creature followed. By the third day there were 5, some large, some lean, all feral, all familiar, beasts once licensed, once hunted, once branded. He recognized a few from the depths, freed during Tala's rebellion. Their collars long gone, but faint glyph scars still visible when light hit just right. They moved like ghosts with bodies. They didn't beg, didn't approach, just followed. When he stopped to rest near the remains of a collapsed tramline, they settled in a wide circle around him. No signal, no command. They faced outward, alert, quiet. He lay on cracked stone and stared at the sky. The city no longer hummed like it used to. The glyph towers were still down. The old frequencies were gone. Now it was just wind, occasional shouts, and the low purr of beast breath behind him. He spoke for the first time in days. "You don't owe me anything." A pause. The largest beast, a limping, antlered thing with half a spine exposed, tilted its head slightly. Then it blinked and stayed. Fog hung low in the outer blocks. Not mist, not smoke, but fog thick and wordless, the kind that muffled spell echoes and soaked into concrete. It moved sluggishly through broken alleys and old support rails, curling around glyph-scarred statues and Hustad pylons. Cael walked with slow certainty, boots crunching grit beneath the stillness. The beasts followed. Today, there were 9. They made no sound. At the edge of a utility shed built from salvage signage, he passed a wall tagged in pale blue ink. Not bureau blue, not synthetic, something hand-mixed. The mural was crude but intentional. A tall figure without a face, arm outstretched, fingers open. Around it, static shapes swirled, glyph fragments, broken loops, a trail of stars that didn't match any constellation. Next to it, scrawled in looping script, one word, Frizz? Cael didn't stop, didn't touch it, but the beast nearest him, a rail-thin thing with luminous ribs, turned its head, then kept walking. The fog shifted behind them, revealing old service tracks, buried glyph crates, half-burnt archive tokens. A breeze swept through the alley, tugging at Cael's coat. His steps never slowed. Somewhere beneath the city, behind dead screens, or below the signal net's lowest strata, a presence stirred. Not the god beast. That dream had shut, but something else. Something still listening, still watching, still threading. Cael did not speak. He did not look back. He walked forward.
The end. I hope you have enjoyed this presentation of Hexhound, Beasts in the Fog on Shady Gray Matter. If you did, please remember to like and subscribe for more audiobook presentations.